So all this paper here has a higher cost. The first, a little bit past Q star is a little bit more cost and benefit, but the further you go to Q1, the greater the spread becomes between the cost and benefit. And so this becomes our deadweight loss. That area represents the dollar amount of the additional cost over the additional benefit. That represents a net loss. What we call a deadweight loss. This is the optimal output. This is the maximum social surplus right here. That's the true cost of making the paper. That's the benefit utility we get. This is our social surplus there. And now what we've done is we've taken some of it away essentially. We threw some of it away by going too far and now producing paper that cost us more than it's worth. This paper here, the problem between Q star and Q1 is that it has a higher cost than benefit. So we're taking resources that have a higher cost than the benefit we get from them. It's like taking resources that have a cost equal to $100 to produce something that has a benefit equal to maybe $80. That makes no sense. Those resources should be used somewhere else. So we're overproducing paper. The equilibrium is above the optimal, and this creates a problem of a deadweight loss for society. A very common problem because pollution is all over the place. Ever since we had the Industrial Revolution, we've been having massive amounts of pollution. We now have, again, the problem with global warming, climate change. All these are negative externalities that are quite devastating to the economy and to the living standards of the populations. So how do we deal with external cost? Well, first of all, the only one that can fix this problem is government, because the free market caused it in the first place. It was the free market that encouraged manufacturers of paper to produce too much paper, and therefore only government can fix this problem. So what economists like to say is that government should try to internalize the cost. Make those who manufacture the paper pay the cost. Don't allow them to impose costs on others who had nothing to do with the manufacturing of the paper. And what that would do is that would shift the supply, or that would shift the marginal private cost curve to the marginal social cost. So go back to the graph. So what we would like to do is to have the marginal private cost shift inward to the left to align with the society's marginal social cost. If you decrease the supply, have it align with a marginal social cost, then equilibrium will be at point B and the external cost problem has gone away, as well as the deadweight loss. Now, one of the main reasons why we have negative externalities is that we don't have well-defined property rights in many different areas. For example, the river, who owns the river? If someone owned the river, then maybe the paper mill would not be allowed to dump the waste products into the river. So lack of ownership is the reason why there's air pollution, because no one owns the air or the river or the ocean, and therefore people would just tend to dump their waste products into it. So one of the main reasons why we have an external cost is a lack of ownership. Noise pollution, your neighbor plays loud music all night because no one owns the air between you and your neighbor. The steel mill pollutes the river because no one owns the river. We drive our cars and pollute the air because no one owns the air. So if some entity is given ownership, that could be one way to solve the problem. Proper cost accounting will come into play. If you own something, you take care of it, you get value from it, and therefore it tends to be managed better. Now we're going to find out that it's hard to give ownership for the air to anyone, or for the ocean to anyone, or for even a river for that matter, because rivers usually border maybe different states or different countries. Now you have to understand, we're not going to get rid of all pollution. We don't want to stop all pollution, since some pollution is efficient. It's very expensive. It's high cost to get rid of all pollution. To get rid of all pollution, you might have no more production of anything. Couldn't drive anywhere, maybe. Even if you have a zero emissions car, it has to run on some fuel and electricity, and that has to be generated somewhere. And there's some pollution from the generation of electricity. Even solar and wind, you have to produce the solar cells. You have to use up resources. You have to use some kind of energy source. And then you have to dispose of the waste products when they're no longer functioning. So we can't get it down to zero. What we want to do is get it down to maybe some efficient level, some optimal level. Now, one interesting way to solve the problem came from an economist called Ronald Coase. And then this is known as the Coase theorem. And this is one way to solve the problem. It can solve small problems. It's not useful for large problems. And so here's the definition. It's a proposition that if property rights exist, only a small number of parties are involved, and transaction costs are low, then private transactions will be efficient. So it deals with small number of parties and low transaction costs. That's the cost of conducting transactions, negotiations, and so forth. Now, why does this work? Because the externalities will be eliminated because the transaction parties take all the cost benefits into account. What makes the theorem interesting is that it doesn't matter who has the property rights. As long as you assign them to some party, you will get the efficient result. And that was sort of the statement that a lot of economists at the time did not agree with. This was done in the early 1960s when he came up with this idea. And the economics profession said it's hogwash. It doesn't matter who gets assigned the property rights. And Ronald Coase said, no, it doesn't. And I'll give the example used in his book that helped win him the Nobel Prize. So he had a railway company that runs a train once a week through farmland. And I guess back in the 40s and 50s, it was the main problem with sparks being emitted from the metal wheels on the rails. And so you had fires being started. Now, there's a benefit from the train's cargo going through. Maybe getting goods from point A to point B would raise the value of them by $20,000. You can sell them for maybe $20,000 more in a town far away. And each week, the train emits sparks that start fires in the crops being grown along the train tracks. And the crops are owned by the farmers. And the crop's lost value is $50,000. Now, no one has ownership between the railroad tracks and the crops being burned. So if the train goes through, which no one can stop it, then the fires will be emitted, and they would lose $50,000 worth of crops each week. Now, if we can assign property rights to one party or the other, we would get the efficient result. Now, first of all, what is the efficient result? It is stopping the trains. Why? Because the benefit of stopping the trains is $50,000 a week. And the cost of stopping the trains is the lost increased value of $20,000. So we would have a net return of $30,000 if the trains were stopped. That's because the crops that are lost has a higher value. They have a higher value than the increased value of the goods being transported. But if ownership of the air between the train and the tracks was given, it doesn't matter who, the efficient outcome, stopping the trains, will result. So it doesn't matter to whom we assign the property rights, it's going to work. Now you're going to say, well, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, if we assign the property rights to the farmers, then the farmers have the authority to stop the trains from going through because they own that air, and therefore they can say you cannot emit those sparks, and then the trains will stop. Well, that makes common sense. But how about if we assign the property rights to the railroads? Why would they stop them? And that's a very good question. And the answer is, well, think about it. If you have a small number of parties, we have a small number of farmers in one railroad company, and transaction costs are low, they can just meet over lunch somewhere, and they can come to a deal. I mean, the farmers have an incentive to stop the train from going through. They're losing $50,000 of crops each week. can they cut a deal? And the farmers might say, well, you gain $20,000. How about if we pay you maybe $25,000 not to have the trains go through? Well, that's more value than the railroad gets from sending the trains through. And so maybe the railroads would say, okay, $5 additional thousand is good for us. The farmers cut their loss in half. Instead of losing $50,000, they lose $25,000. Now, the farmers still won't be happy. They're going to say it's not fair maybe for the railroad to get the property rights. And I didn't say this is fair. I just said, I'm saying for Ronald Coase that the efficient result would come about, and that's true. The efficient result will come about if we sign even the property rights to the railroad, because the farmers and the railroad will come to an agreement, sign a contract, and the efficient result of stopping the trains will turn out to be the case. Now, again, this is only practical if the cost of negotiating deals over pollution are low and a fair and politically acceptable agreement can be reached without ownership rights, which can be enforced with low cost. So even if politically, I mean, if they did assign the rights to the railroad, politically they may not be acceptable to the farmers, and so there may be a problem there as well. So sometimes you cannot assign the property rights because of political reasons, fairness reasons, and if the parties are too large. For example, climate change. I mean, we have billions of people, we have hundreds of countries. It's hard to maybe negotiate that in terms of assigning property rights to one party or to another. So large pollution problems probably can't be solved through the Coase theorem, but small problems, small communities, a problem between two neighbors, that can be solved by this theorem. But again, politically, it's hard to assign the property rights to one person to another when people talk about fairness. Okay, I'll stop there and come back for part 3.